Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 18th, 2021. Time for another show. Time to broadcast another show from Cancun, Mexico, I guess. That's why not? We might as well go ahead and do so. The big, I don't know, do we still call it Twitter rumor at this stage, or are we pretty sure that it's all true? The big story this morning is that while Texas is freezing in the dark, although I guess the sun's coming up now, power's out, they're freezing and have no heat, and then now have added to their woes no water, although I guess that's actually been a problem for several days, but reaching a crisis situation at this point. And they, of course, have asked people to boil their water, but there's no way to boil it because of all the people who have electric stoves that aren't working. Lots of serious issues striking Texas all over the place, and I guess the word is that someone says that they have spotted Ted Cruz spotted him at the airport getting onto a flight to Cancun with his family, where presumably they have water and electricity and heat and all that sort of fun stuff that civilizations tend to enjoy. Interesting that they would have to flee to Mexico to find that. No comment, I think, so far from his office about whether or not that's him leading, hand-wringing Democrats everywhere, wondering whether maybe they've just spotted someone that kind of sort of looks like him, and of course wearing a mask, who can tell, and now afraid that they've been caught in some kind of an elaborate trap set out for them. But the more likely thing is, yeah, he went to Mexico. I think the last thing I saw about it before heading onto the air was Armando's comment on it, tweeting or retweeting the word of Dan. I don't know how he pronounces his last name. Isett, who knows who the hell he is, but apparently some sort of Republican communications guy, and I don't know, I guess Republican and pro Ted Cruz or something like that. And Dan had this to say, a few notes this morning. One, Senator Ted Cruz doesn't set state and municipal electric policy. And two, the Democrat-controlled U.S. Senate is not in session, so there are no votes to miss. And three, if you're big mad that he took his kids on a vacation, you're just a partisan hack, which Armando, I think, quite correctly has interpreted as, yeah, well, that must mean Ted Cruz really did go to Cancun, because that's the sort of lame defense you'd see put up if he did. So what the hell? He might as well have done that. Now, where it came from, I am not entirely sure, but I think the first indication I saw, but yeah, as a matter of fact, Justice is sharing this with me. I saw this fly by, this morning, people retweeting it, I guess, from last night. David Schuster had this tweet just confirmed, although I guess nobody's actually confirmed anything. Is this the tweet from this morning? No, this is still from last night. Just confirmed Senator Ted Cruz and his family flew to Cancun tonight for a few days at a resort they've visited before. Cruz seems to believe there isn't much for him to do in Texas, and there might not be. For the millions of fellow Texans who remain without electricity and water and are literally freezing, but you're supposed to stay there and commiserate with them and tell them that you're working the phones furiously to try to make something happen. The photo accompanying Schuster's tweet is fairly convincing. It certainly has all the hallmarks of an unkempt and masked Ted Cruz boarding a flight. But I've seen lots of people speculating that it was just someone else. I think there's some actual reporting on it out there, too, as well. So, and in fact, our good friends at KSAT are weighing in on this. KSAT dominating the airwaves here at the Kagro in the Morning Show. Did Ted Cruz fly to Cancun during Texas's winter disaster? Cruz hasn't commented, but some Twitter sleuths believe they have proof. And they're pretty convincing photos. It certainly looks a lot like him. Photos circulating on Twitter late Wednesday purport to show, see, even they know how to phrase these things, purport to show Texas Senator Ted Cruz on a flight to Cancun, Mexico during the state's historic disaster. The images show a man with a striking similarity to Cruz in an airport and on a plane. Cruz's office didn't respond to a request for comment, but this story will be updated if they do. Other reporters said they had reached out as well, but had not heard back. In addition to someone who looks an awful lot like Ted Cruz getting on the flight to Cancun, at the gate is included in the photo, I guess, someone who looks an awful lot like his wife, Heidi, is that right? I think is her name. And you know what Donald Trump thinks of her. So I'm sure there's comment to come from the office of the former president, which is set up now to send out press releases by teletype, I guess, or whatever, telex. I don't know what they're using to get the word out these days. All right, Greg Dworkin is also in Cancun and joins us now from, I don't know, a nice resort where Ted Cruz is down by the pool in a Speedo and a down vest, I understand. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. I don't know if it was Ted Cruz or not, but
I don't know.
There's two possibilities.
It was Ted Cruz. That's one.
This guy was Ted Cruz, and everybody hates him.
Yeah.
Or this guy wasn't Ted Cruz, but everybody still hates Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
So either way, Ted Cruz is a jerk.
Right.
Now, what's going on in Texas is terrible. I don't know that he could fix it, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is, if you're a senator and you're responsible for your state, why don't you take the family on a nice vacation to D.C. and, lobby for some emergency help while you're there? I mean, it's not like you're going to accomplish anything because emergency, I think, has already been granted by Biden, but look like you're doing something.
Yes. Well, it looks like he's wearing a mask. That's something. Wearing what do you call them? The earbuds, the wireless ones, AirPods. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, it's Ted Cruz, so everybody hates him. That's all I can say about that. The issues with Texas are enormous, just as Texas is enormous. Things are getting worse there. There's a rolling power outage. It turns out the major reason why this happened, aside from the fact that they are not on the U.S. grid and therefore don't follow federal regulations and didn't prepare for winter, except for isolated places like El Paso that did. The problem is that it's so cold that the natural gas lines froze.
Yeah, that's
so it's fossil fuel as well as the equipment for everything else. So it's the fossil fuels that failed, not the wind turbines. So they can blame anybody they want. They can blame AOC. They can blame the Green New Deal, and they have. But it doesn't change the fact that they were ill prepared for cold weather. It's their responsibility. They're private companies, so the only thing that's happening is that the companies are just jacking up the prices to everybody, and they're not helping the situation. And they caused this by being all laissez-faire, let the market speak, too bad for you. And so the question is going to be what happens now. Here's a piece in the New York Times. Now it's coming back to bite them. Democrats see an opening in GOP oversight of Texas grid. As the state reels from power outages, Democrats look to turn the tables on the Republicans who dominate state government. And you have Rick Perry, who said, well, basically Texans would rather freeze than give up their freedom.
Well, just like they would rather die than wear masks or kill grandma than lose the economy. Sure. Right.
And Texans are pissed. Regular, ordinary, average, everyday Texans. And so, this kind of crap is not going to fly down there.
Well, right. It constitutes messing with them, I think.
Right. You have Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, who's a crook and trying to screw whoever works for him. And all the whistleblowers are saying he's basically using his office for ill-gotten gain, illicit gain. You have Greg Abbott, who this really is, Texas Katrina, and he's handling it terribly. The Republican-dominated Texas legislature, the Times says, is also no stranger to intrigue. In one episode, a secret audio recording in 2019 by a conservative activist showed Dennis Bonnen, the former speaker, plotting against fellow Republicans by seeking to enlist the support of hardline activists that take him down in primary challenges. So, you have political mayhem there.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe it's about time Democrats took over state government and ran it properly.
Would be a good idea, worth trying, I think. Also, by the way, primary lesson of Katrina in terms of bad optics: don't get on a plane and view it from above. That was a key mistake.
Yeah, send out the picture as if you're doing stuff.
Oh, I'm surveying the damage. I didn't even take a window seat, I don't think. Ted did.
Right.
All right. Well, too bad.
Wind power was chiefly not to blame, says the New York Times. The main problem was frigid temperatures that stalled natural gas production, which is responsible for the majority of Texas power supply. Wind makes up just a fraction, 7%. As frigid weather grips the center of the nation, causing widespread power outages, freezing temperatures, slippery roads, and weather-related deaths, Governor Abbott's voice was among the most prominent in a chorus of political figures this week to quickly assert green energy sources such as wind and solar were contributing to the blackouts. The talking points, coming largely from conservatives, reinvigorated a long-running campaign to claim that emission-spewing fossil fuels are too valuable a resource to give up.
Yes.
Despite the fact that burning of fossil fuels is helping to drive the phenomenon of increasing dangerous hurricanes and other storms, as well as unusual weather patterns. So your fossil fuel burning is why Texas is freezing. Oh. Well, how can that be? It's warm and cold, and those are like two opposite elements. Well, go back to school and learn some science.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this whole stupid idea thing. And it's weird, even when you try to play that same game back. Again, look, the idea that we're supposed to all swallow here that windmills and wind turbines don't work in wind, like what a storm would bring, is ridiculous. And then, but I still have people saying, well, they could freeze, and sometimes they do ice up. Well, I don't know. They produce an awful lot of friction when they turn too. It seems to me like a furiously turning wind turbine would be difficult to ice over. I know the fact is that maybe one or two of them actually did, but many people also pointing out if you actually weatherize your wind turbines, they work anywhere, including Antarctica, apparently.
They do pretty well there. But that costs money, and these are private companies, and so they don't want to.
Right, so they put a pinwheel out with a
It's too soon after a weather event to weaponize it, because it's always too soon, except when we do it.
Yeah. All right, well... I don't know. I just thought that the idea of the common sense stupid thing, like bringing a snowball onto the Senate floor and saying there can't be global warming because snow, I figured I would push back and say, well, there's no chance that turbines don't work during a windstorm. That's crazy. But apparently that doesn't work. I don't have a license to do that. I need to ask somebody's permission somewhere. All right.
Right. But as you point out, there are wind turbines in Antarctica, so one would think
they do work.
That if you have the proper, gear, if you put mittens on, with that little elastic that goes from one to the other, so you don't lose them under your coat, right? And you put that on the wind turbine, should be fine.
Use Bernie Sanders mittens. Very popular.
Something like that.
Okay, you need 3, I guess, per turbine, so that's an odd lot you'll need, but okay.
Right. All of this to say, it's really bad in Texas.
Yeah.
People are dying and freezing. And again, the place isn't built for it. And it isn't like, oh, you stupid Texans, why don't you just do this, that, or you can't. Right. And you certainly can't fix it now. I mean, the whole thing about pandemics and hurricanes is you got to prepare beforehand. And if you try to do it during, you're going to be scrambling, as we all know.
And
so,
wet.
Good luck to Texans. We love Texans. It's your government that we can't stand.
Yes.
And if you don't have it in you to really hate Greg Abbott, just hate Ted Cruz.
Sure. I mean, I think there's room in my heart for hating them both. But what can you? I'm a giving kind of person that way. Best of luck. I don't know how to. I assume we'll hear by the end of the day about some ways that we can actually send some sort of aid as private individuals, not to mention government aid. Maybe Chef Jose Andres.
Right. I've been asking. I haven't seen anything yet, so all I can do is send you New England wisdom. Here's what to do with snow when your power goes out. This is how you use it to flush the toilets. This is what you can do with it. And hopefully you have some way of, it's always, you should boil your water because it's safer. Well, if you don't have power, how are you supposed to do that?
Right.
Well, it depends what you have.
Boil it.
Maybe you have a gas. Maybe you have a charcoal grill and you can do it outside. Never do charcoal inside. You'll die of carbon monoxide. Right. And by the way, another New England tip for people in Texas, be very, very careful.
Oh dear. Okay.
With what you do to heat, because if you don't have good ventilation, you're going to die. People die of carbon monoxide poisoning all the time because they think they're clever and they do something like take the charcoal grill inside, to heat.
I'm going to do that.
Because you have to heat. But, carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless, invisible, and will kill you if you do stuff like that.
Yes, and they don't see color, so, it's doubly bad for them, and they have to be very careful. I did see somebody pointing out that, remember, don't forget the lessons that Ted Cruz did teach you before he took off for Cancun. You can always make bacon on your AR-15, so there's that option too. But again, we'll say aim it low, fire it into the ground, heat up the barrel, cook your bacon that way, sure, but don't let the stray ammunition fly out. You don't want to send stray rounds.
Well, the good hand warm. AR-15s are terrific hand warmers. They should remarket that.
Right.
Just shoot them off and then, hold them until you're warm again.
Right. Bacon can be cooked, warm your hands, right? All sorts of amazing things can be done with them. And there are in every household. So you don't have heaters, but you have guns. I guess that's what you're going to have to do. I know the ammunition is expensive, but do you want to freeze or not? All right. Well, just be careful. Exactly. Again, aim down.
Right. So while all of this is going on, a reminder, my pulmonologist friend Nick Mark, MD, reminds us Texas has long resisted interconnection with the national power grid to avoid federal regulation. We talked about that on the show yesterday. More than 70 hours into the Texas blackout, the folly of this isolationist approach is clear. With more catastrophic storms due to climate change, we'll need more redundancy, not less. Right now, ERCOT, that's the Texas grid, is supplying less power than it did 2 days ago at the very same time. More than 60 hours into the blackout, and this is a yesterday tweet from Javier Blas, there's little sign of improvement other than potential demand is a bit lower, so that gives some breathing room.
Oh, okay. I guess. Demand is probably higher. There's just a lot of people who've given up, like entering the workforce, for instance.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck again. Sorry about not having a electric grid connected to the rest of the country. Texit was a bad idea, and
yeah, it was. So let's just hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. The next time, do a better job. Get your grid online. Talk to the rest of the country. Do it the way we do it, so everybody can help each other.
Yeah.
And maybe re-regulate, because what you're doing is not working.
Right. Got to spend.
So we have Lent coming up. We have a
starting now
a poll here from YouGov America. What are Americans giving up for Lent this year? Desserts or sweets, 24%, soda, 20%, fast food or dining out, 20%, alcohol, 17%, gossiping, 16%. I have two things to suggest. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but for those who are, I have two things to suggest. You could give up Ted Cruz, and you could also give up Twitter if you want.
That'll help with the
because that'll make you feel better. And I suggested that because I saw a couple of my Catholic friends saying, you won't see me for a while.
Oh.
What's a while? 40 days.
Oh.
So why is that? Oh, I figured out why that is. But Ryan Matthews, one of the people who follows me, says, you can't do that. I get most of the content in my feed from your retweets.
Yeah, right. So what are you going to do?
I'll have to follow more people? That's not fair.
Oh. Well,
so, we do what we can. I'll be here. I'm not getting off Twitter. I'm just saying I've seen people suggest that. Want to acknowledge those things coming up. It's so interesting what's happening now with coronavirus dropping, but with various and sundry holidays moving up fast. We have to keep an eye on that. The numbers are dropping. There's less cases. There's less hospitalizations. There's less deaths. At the same time, we're getting more variants reported. More vaccine is going out. Biden has committed to even more vaccine going out. That's all good. But the variants is the bad one. And so we're in a race to get stuff done versus having the variants take over and be more infective and perhaps more deadly. So part of the deal there is that it's not the time to drop your guard. It doesn't mean that you have to live in the house and do nothing.
Right. Don't give up your guard for Lent.
And don't give up, because there is hope on the horizon. Things are getting better, but just be careful. Still wear your mask when you go out. Make sure you get your vaccine when it's available. It's not available for most people yet. Fauci was hoping there'd be enough by April. Biden said yesterday probably more like July. And the problem, of course, is Johnson & Johnson isn't coming up with huge amounts of vaccine into the market right away. And so if you don't have the vaccine, you can't vaccinate people. And, we see the lines, the contours, the outlines of how things will get better. We're just not there yet. And so you have to be very careful in that spot where, it's like after Trump lost, but Biden wasn't inaugurated yet. The dangerous time is when you think you've gotten your result, but you really don't have your result yet. And so you have to be careful during that time because it's easy to say, okay, it's over. No, it's not. You still have to social distance. You still have to do all of that. And along those lines, there was a very interesting thread from a couple of days ago by Apoorva Mandavili, who is a New York Times health reporter, very, very good one, relatively new on the scene, but, quite excellent. And this is a very balanced thread about the CDC guidelines on schools, which I thought I would do because I think it's an important topic.
All right.
She says clear science-based guidance was long overdue, so everybody was agog all week. Did they get what they wanted? Well, this is a long thread. So we'll do part of it now, part of it after the break, I guess. Before I dive in, I have no agenda here, she says. I'm not anti-kids, anti-schools, anti-teachers. The only thing I am is anti-virus. I follow the science, but despite what both sides insist, the science isn't straightforward, or we wouldn't have this much division and dissent. So back to the CDC guidelines. Pro-opening advocates hope for a sensible read of the evidence in teachers' unions for strict precautions in vaccinations. Did they get what they want? No.
No.
There's no issue that's more divisive right now. Well, masks and vaccines, but kids of all colors are suffering, and the long-term loss of education and emotional toll might be devastating. On the other hand, the rates in the U.S. might be dropping, but objectively, they're still very high. And if this is too long, you didn't want to read and listen to the whole thing, you will hear something that I told you months and months and months ago that the CDC finally formalized. What you do depends upon the level of infection in your community.
All right.
So you can have a set of guidelines that sounds great for one area, but it doesn't work in another area because area A has actually got things under control and area B doesn't.
Okay.
So you can't do the same thing in both places, which is really frustrating to people who want to black and white do this, do this, do this.
Oh, well.
Schools should be the last to close and first to reopen, but many communities have not done that and probably never will. The communities have not budgeted for schools by closing bars and restaurants. If you want to stop spread in your community, you close the bars and restaurants so you can open the school. Instead, we kept the bars and restaurants open and we closed the schools, something I ranted on months ago. It's still crazy.
Yeah, well.
Pay the bars and restaurants. Don't screw them, but keep them closed. Open the schools. And the only way you can do that is to decrease community spread, and the only way you can do that is to close the bars and restaurants.
Yes.
In fact, many are now reopening closed businesses before you're opening schools. The CDC, as might be expected from a federal agency, took a conservative middle path. It said elementary schools can open, always, but when transmission is high, go hybrid, and middle and high schools, be remote. So it's all based on the transmission in the community. And it sounds reasonable, given what we know about greater risk to high school students and middle school students, maybe compared to kids under 10, but pro-opening advocates are not happy because what CDC considers highest transmission is way too low.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's how you prevent it from becoming unacceptably
right, which
high.
is their job. In fact, CDC director said yesterday that 90% of school districts would fall into the high transmission category right now. And many schools have been operating at these levels without a problem, but if they're taking all precautions like masking, distancing, hand washing, then you can open. And nowhere in that statement does it say anything about ventilation, but this is an airborne disease. And so other advocates are saying, well, if you don't talk about ventilation in the schools, you're missing the point of how things spread.
That's
if you have good ventilation in the schools, you can do a lot of things that an older school with poor ventilation cannot do.
Yes, although if your school is old enough, it might be ventilated for Spanish flu. So,
yeah. Some scientists have pointed out that in-school transmission is a better metric than community transmission because schools can control the environment and make it safer than the community, and that's an excellent point, but it's a big but. We can only know what in-school transmission is if schools test, not just diagnostic testing of symptomatic people, but screening or surveillance, and they're not doing that. And the problem, it seems to her, is that schools don't take precautions and need testing are also the ones least likely to implement testing unless somebody forces them to, which is unlikely. So maybe this is CDC's way of guiding them. Now, some scientists have said the CDC should at least make it clear for schools that are doing testing, the bar should be different. Again, another excellent point. But the CDC guidelines also said physical distancing is only required at high transmission. So pro-opening advocates would say it's unnecessary at all levels. Some teachers' unions say it's 6 feet minimum at all times. And what we know is that indoors with poor ventilation, 6 feet isn't better than 3, but with good masking, both are fine. So the CDC buried all talk of ventilation, and my hunch is they did so because they didn't want to talk about HVAC systems to stop schools from opening. But a lot of schools have really, really bad ventilation, and the teachers are well aware, and that's why they're so unhappy.
Yeah, well, it was only relatively late in the pandemic that they actually came to that realization. And, by that point,
but they still don't fully acknowledge it in all of their official
really
stuff.
should.
And often that's the case because things have to go through committee and get argued about, and a fine point has to be made, and this and that and everything else. And then finally, 3 months after everybody already knows, it becomes official policy, and that's the way the government works, including CDC. And so, again, I have some experience trying to get them to change direction, and it's like trying to change the direction of an ocean liner. They have their ways of doing things, and they really don't like being pushed to do stuff. Now, the Trump administration tried to push them to do stuff, and you saw the reaction. They just shut up entirely.
Yeah, that didn't
right?
work either.
You couldn't more forcibly try to change direction, even though it was the wrong direction, than what the Trump administration was doing. And how did CDC respond? You didn't hear from them.
Yeah, they
don't respond well to, hey, little urging, why don't you just change this direction here? They just don't do that.
Yeah. Well, all right. Yes, and I'm sure that they just, they don't need to cause or make any more waves than are already out there. But
right. So that's the problem. We'll talk a little bit more about it after the break. But it's a difficult situation. This is a pretty good balanced summary about what's going on.
All right. It's nice to find one. We'll be back to it in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Continue on. We're in the middle of the lengthy tweet thread on school guidance from the CDC. Do we want to jump back into
so
that?
The thing about school guidance in the CDC, if you were just tuning in, is it depends upon community transmission, and that's going to be different in different places. It doesn't talk enough about ventilation. And then the author of this tweet, Porva Mandavilli, goes on to say a point about unions. Now, some are tough and are asking for things that will be impossible to fulfill even with low transmission, even in the fall, and that's not helping the ugly fights over school reopenings. On the other hand, talking about teachers and unions as evil is ridiculous. Nothing about the school debate is straightforward. I've spoken to many, many teachers over the past weeks who are heartbroken about being painted as lazy and horrible people. Some teachers are talking about permanently leaving the profession over this when we need more and not less teachers. And not all unions are bad, just as not all people who want schools to open want it for sensible, logical reasons. Now, here's a full disclosure. Most New York Times reporters are also represented by a guild that has our back, so I'm on this, and I see this from both sides, she says, and I don't think it helps to demonize either side. Neither side is malicious. Neither side is stupid. As a parent of an anxious middle schooler and a hypersocial elementary schooler, I desperately want schools to open, but as a science journalist, I genuinely believe there are no straightforward one-size-fits-all answers. With community transmissions at the level it is, and with so many schools not following precautions, there can't be a low bar for reopening. And yet, it's not fair to the many schools that have done very well to have to close. So if you came here looking for simple takeaways, I'm sorry, I'm no apologist for the CDC, as those of you who have followed me for a while know, but I sympathize with the agency's plight in this case, and I am heartsick over the ugly fighting between the two camps, and that is all. So that's a pretty good balanced summary of what's going on. You have to step back and look at the bigger picture. There have been a couple of stories about how the Florida governor is a rock star because Florida is not doing any worse than any other places that closed down, and Florida didn't close down. And the fact of the matter is there's so much going on here that makes things complicated. For example, you can have a place that did really badly like North or South Dakota because the governor just did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, one of the epidemiologists put together a really interesting graph that I squirreled away somewhere, and I have to find it. Didn't find it in time for the show, but I will send it along later today to you. Okay. And they had two graphs and said, what's the better correlation? If you're looking to see how much disease is in your community right now, which of these two factors mattered more? The percentage of disease you had prior to September 1st compared to now?
Okay.
Or how Democratic they voted compared to Republican.
Oh.
And it turns out there's almost no correlation with how much disease you had before September 1st, but a really good correlation between the more Democratic you are, the better you did as a state now.
I see. Okay. Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily, see the point there, that does not necessarily point to the policy of the governor and the state legislature. It's like when you open restaurants but community spread is high, people won't go.
Yeah.
You have a combination of things like in Florida, for example, excuse me, where the governor does the wrong thing, but the people do the right thing.
No, okay.
Or you can have California where the governor does the right thing and Southern California does the wrong thing and refuses to wear masks and so on and so forth. And the combination puts you on equal footing in each state.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you can't step back and say, okay, well, that governor did this, and therefore, you know, that in a small state like Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, yeah, you can say that. But in the larger states where the cities do one thing and the rural areas do something else, and yet the rural areas aren't close together. I live in a rural area, and basically you don't have to wear a mask 24/7. If you're in the car and you're driving, you only have to put it on at certain spots. And when you're outside and you're like near nobody, you don't really need to wear a mask. Okay. And you can't do that in the middle of Manhattan. You know, what's going on depends upon where you're at. And that's why, just like with schools, it all depends upon your individual communities. That's a very difficult message for central governments to do. That's the argument for making it local. But you have to have responsible local people to do it.
Right.
And when you don't, it falls apart. And yet people read the news, they understand what's going on, and they take steps themselves even when the government doesn't. So again, you can open the restaurants, but nobody in Connecticut's going to go if the spread rate is very high, if the infection rate is very high right now.
Yeah.
Well, and so it doesn't work. And then if the rate goes down and things get better as they are now, Ned Lamont, the governor, can open the schools and people will go. They can open the restaurants and people will go, and it's all dependent upon the rate in the community. So it's not necessarily completely up to the governor. Governors can close things, but they can't open them by fiat because people will vote with their feet and won't, attend.
Yeah, there's always that. And although that was the Swedish model originally too, and they didn't do all that well with that one. But people
they probably would do better now if given everything we know.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible that people would take it more seriously now.
I mean, half a million deaths in the United States, it's hard not to do,
Right.
And you could say all you want to the polls and to the media, well, I'm not going to wear a mask because I want to own the libs. But, if I'm Ted Cruz and I'm going to Cancun, I'm putting a mask on.
Right. Well, you can't get on the plane without it. So, he's not going to risk it.
Well, he didn't make a scene. He didn't make a fuss.
Right.
He just put the mask on.
Yeah, well, he didn't want to be spotted, and he did want to get to Cancun, and that's what you have to do.
I'm not wearing this mask to protect anybody from this big virus. I'm putting the mask on so you don't know who I am.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering about that. Like, this was a perfect opportunity for you to be double, triple, quadruple masking. Put them over your eyes. I mean, wear a hat, something.
By the way, I have to throw this in because otherwise I'll forget.
Oh?
But, you mentioned the other day that the Trump Tower or
Trump
the
Plaza,
casino in Atlantic City had imploded by design.
Yes.
Because they blew it up to get rid of it. It was an eyesore.
Right.
And there is a Twitter feed, which is a satiric feed, the North Korean DPRK news service.
Yes, right.
Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And they had a tweet that said, "Towers named in honor of Marshal Kim Jong-un do not implode."
Right. Unless their brother-in-law is staying there, I guess.
Right.
Right. They're doing much better there in North Korea.
That's about the only thing I want to say about Donald Trump.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, there's one more thing I want to say about Donald Trump. That was my intro to this story from the Washington Post. Trump-McConnell clash threatens to settle into a Cold War as GOP eyes midterms. So the blood between them is so bad that Lindsey Graham has to play peacemaker.
Okay, he's great at that, I'm sure. Yeah, right, whatever. I mean, I don't know whether that's going to work or not.
The point is that Trump still wants to purge the Republican Party of anybody who isn't a loyalist. And if he wants to cut it in half or, shrink it by a third, that's fine.
I guess so. Go for it.
Party. I'm okay with that.
But he's not really in charge of it, so he could just be retiring and go play golf. I guess he's faking that he's still interested in policy. He's just mad about things and things that made him look bad, and he wants to sort of try to erase the record. And I don't know. It seems like a long-term project to get rid of someone like McConnell, and he just doesn't really have the attention span to do it. But for the next couple of days, he can yell about McConnell.
Well, we mentioned Jason Miller, who we are speculating is pro bono because otherwise he'll have to pay child support. It doesn't make too much sense having the least popular person in the party attacking the most popular, Trump spokesman Jason Miller said on Wednesday. I'm not sure what Mitch thinks he's going to accomplish. And Stephen Law, president of the Senate Leadership Fund, said, well, the contrast is pretty simple. Mitch McConnell doesn't care about being liked. He cares about winning. And Donald Trump cares about being liked, and he doesn't care about winning.
Yeah. So I guess they're going to get on each other's nerves anyway.
Right.
And it
according to this story,
Trump
and McConnell haven't spoken to each other since December 14th.
Yeah, that
Trump
wouldn't
refused to speak to him.
Okay. I think McConnell may refuse as well. So there. It's even. They do it.
The fun thing would be instead of Lindsey Graham, maybe you should send Nancy Pelosi to be peacemaker.
Sure, she would probably be better at it. Send Ted Cruz, who, by the way, is still probably the less popular.
He can't. He's in Cancun. He can't do that.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I don't know. You can do everything remotely these days. He can use El Zoom and come in that way. I don't know what they call it in Mexico, but it's the same. But right, I don't think he's capable of making any peace between them. I don't even know if Lindsey Graham is truly interested or not.
Yeah, he is. Lindsey Graham would like to be in the majority. He wants to be Senate Judiciary Chair again.
Yeah.
What Lindsey Graham would like to do is convince Donald Trump to not endorse a bunch of Christine O'Donnell and Todd Akins and Lauren Boeberts. So that because that's what Trump wants to do. He wants all the Trumpy people.
Yeah.
Bad candidates. Boebert won her district, although, it sounds like everybody in Colorado who's a Democrat is getting ready to run against her.
Right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene may be in a safer district than Boebert, so we'll see. But in the past, people like Todd Akin, who ran against Claire McCaskill and lost, and folks like that. Christine O'Donnell was the one who had to put up an ad that said, "I am not a witch."
Right. Yes.
If that's who you're going to wind up running, you're going to wind up losing, and that's what Lindsey Graham fears, and that's why he's trying to make peace between McConnell and Graham. Graham will just openly say this is Trump's party, but at the same time, he's not that stupid.
Yes.
Stupid, but he's not that stupid, and he doesn't want to lose more. And if Trump has his way, he'll run Jason Miller's and Stephen Miller's, and that'll be his candidates.
Yeah, and Lara Trump,
and every part of the Trump, Lara Trump, and every part of the Trump family, Ivanka Trump in Florida.
Sure.
And we'll primary all of these folks, and that's what Trump wants, and that's not necessarily good for the Republican Party, and that's why Lindsey Graham is trying to make peace.
Okay. Well,
so that's ongoing. That's not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-off story. Oh, well, they didn't. They They didn't speak to each other. They don't like each other. Well, yeah, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Okay. Well, we'll see how long he can keep up the effort. I mean, he is living it up at Pervolago. So I suppose on the one hand, if he just has to, if all he really has to do is keep tweeting or sending out statements that he's mad at Mitch McConnell, I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for him. Organizing an effective effort to dislodge him that goes beyond saying, that guy's the Trumpiest person I've ever heard, I endorse him, and then losing that race. That I don't know whether anything more will develop there. But I hope nothing does. I mean, I want it to end at endorsing terrible candidates and having them lose races. So right. He's definitely good at that, and he may keep it up.
And the last thing I think we should cover, we just have to because it's a piece of news for today's segment, is the fact that Rush Limbaugh is dead.
That's right. Like Generalissimo Francisco Franco.
And today he's still dead. Right. I think the best possible thing one can say is what Betty Davis said about Joan Crawford.
Oh? Probably.
When Davis, they didn't get along.
Oh, yeah.
And according to the L.A. Times, when Davis received word of Crawford's heart attack and subsequent death in 1977, she allegedly said, you should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Mm-hmm. She's dead. Good.
Wow, okay. Well, there were a lot of people that didn't like her very much. I guess a lot of people don't like the other guy.
People don't like, it's bad to speak ill of the dead. I think our friend Lawrence Lewis summarized it well.
Yeah?
You should not celebrate his death. You should mourn his life.
Why not? We were forced to for many years.
By the way, is the exact opposite of, what you're supposed to say.
Okay.
You shouldn't mourn his death. You should celebrate his life. No, actually, in his case, you should mourn his life.
Yes. Well, if you won't celebrate his death.
And that the reason for that, basically, is that he was a racist, misogynist prick who basically loved to torment people who didn't agree with him for money. And so, screw him.
Yeah, it's a good death. What can you say? I mean, he's been, I guess, off the market for quite a while, I guess. I think he was still sort of kind of broadcasting. He was a much diminished
up to the very end, he was still broadcasting.
But
I don't have any problems, about the fact that he was addicted to pain medications and had a problem there. Lots of people do. I don't hold that against him. What I hold against him is taking his show and deliberately, trying to demonize gays, people with HIV, a whole career of doing stuff like that. He's a horrible person.
No doubt about it. One of the worst, and remained one of the worst until the end, as not only just still broadcasting, but still broadcasting his, backwards, upside down nonsense. He was a mean person. And it's a good thing that he died, and I wish it had happened sooner. So, there's nothing I can tell you about it that's going to make anybody feel spiritual. I'm glad he's gone. I wish it had happened sooner. It should have. And just desserts that he died, and good. The end. A lot of people have said more about it. And
I feel bad for his family. That's got nothing to do with him.
Give the money back. I'll feel fine for you. But they're living on his hate money, so whoop-de-doo. What can I tell you? Some people have to suffer. So
absolute travesty. This guy gets the Medal of Freedom from the President of the United States.
Diminished it forever. But then he only made it worse by giving it out to several other people as well. But, they're going to need to come up with a new award at some point, I think, just to diminish maybe now that he's dead, they can get back to giving it out, and he doesn't sit around gloating that he got one, too.
Well, I hope that's his legacy, reclaiming the Medal of Freedom to people who actually deserve it. Yeah. People like Eugene Goodman or, Colonel Vindman.
Yes, right. Well, we can say he didn't get to enjoy it for long. So
anyway, that's my segment. It's I don't hold grudges.
Okay.
I'm just pointing out he's still dead. Tomorrow he'll still be dead. I won't be mad at him, but he'll still be dead.
True, yes, and Francisco Franco too, and he's relevant to today's broadcast. He got mentioned on yesterday's broadcast, not just for being dead too. he got caught up in the whole L. Brent Bozell the Fourth story. I don't know. You must have caught that at some point yesterday, if not through the show, then elsewhere. Community transmission of the story. But son of current prominent Republican conservative activist L. Brent Bozell III. You may have figured this out because you understand math and naming. But yeah, he was on the floor of the Senate during the insurrection and charged. I don't believe he's yet been arrested, but one thing I learned about the family was that his grandfather, L. Brent Bozell Jr., they really did this 4 times. In addition to working as a speechwriter for Joe McCarthy and ghostwriting Barry Goldwater's book, Conscience of a Conservative, eventually so fed up with the state of the United States, not conservative enough for him, left and went to Franco's Spain to work for Catholic fascists instead. And what a family, huh?
I think Bill Buckley's grandson was also at the insurrection, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I read that the other day.
Yeah, well, I think that their families are related, and I don't know, it might have been the same guy, but Bozells and Buckleys are intermarried back a generation or two now. So I think this guy is Bozells, is a Bozell himself, and is like the great nephew of William F. Buckley as well.
Something like that. Interesting. By the way, Chad Pergram, who is a reporter for Fox, colleague Paul Steinhauser confirms GOP Texas Senator Ted Cruz traveled to Cancun amid the Texas storm power outages. GOP source says the photos speak for themselves. This is from 6 minutes ago.
All right. Well, good.
So
I guess he'll come back later today and say he was on a taco run for people to feed people in Texas. I'm sure. I don't know. See whether he turns around or not. Late takeoff for it too. Obviously wasn't a planned vacation like during the Senate break or anything. It was just, we don't have heat, let's go to Cancun.
Something like that.
Okay. Awesome.
I see something else here. Yeah. That is somebody got a hold of the United Business class standby for upgrades. Mm-hmm. And Rafael Cruz, his name is on the list for that plane going to Cancun.
As Rafael.
Well, that's his name.
Yeah, well, sure, but
right?
Who cares about that?
But the funny thing is, that's
a good, all right.
Heidi's name isn't there.
It is.
It'd be just like Ted Cruz for him to fly first class and let her sit in the back of the plane.
I didn't see her in the photo. That's true. It did look like he was alone and sitting down, and it would look to be first class, but I had assumed he might have booked first class tickets. But okay, he elbowed her out of the way and took the first class thing. That reminds me, you're right. His real name is Rafael.
Senator Cruz. We only have one seat available. And Ted said, well, it's not a problem.
Duh. Watch this. Whack.
What's the problem? I'm missing what the problem is here.
Right. Can I bring my soup, at least? So, he's got a carry-on bag full of cans of soup that he brought with him, I'm sure. I was thinking about his real name being Rafael. Just a Twitter reference here. Does Karen Tumulty talk to him on Twitter? I noticed the other day she made a blanket declaration. Her new policy was going to be, I won't talk to anybody who doesn't use their real name on Twitter. And I was wondering, does that apply to like Willard Romney and Rafael Cruz or not? But I think
or Ronna McDaniel.
Yeah, right. That too.
Who absolutely doesn't use her real name.
I'm wondering. I think that she means something different by this, but still. Anyway, I mean, it's either it's policy or it isn't. And I think it's not when it comes to famous people who don't use their real name. It's okay. Right. I won't ask her about that. I don't care, and she doesn't either. So, all right. Very good. We'll look forward to more news about Ted Cruz, and I guess, has he landed yet? Twitter, and whether he comes back early and insists that I really did plan a trip to Cancun for only 36 hours. What about it? You're not forcing me to do anything. You can't prove it. All right.
Well, that'd be interesting,
Yeah.
For health reasons, the United States has just declared nobody returns from Cancun.
Right. True. And it's we don't know who he's been talking to, who he's been sitting next to. All right. I'll go for it. Right? Why not? Or I guess we shouldn't be saying that they should, say separate him from his kids on their return, though. But it might be justifiable, but not for the kids. Anyway, we'll see when he comes back, what he has to say about it, and whether his office changes their mind and owns up to it, or just they might be thinking they're owning the libs by not answering the phone calls. Could be.
Well, if they're back in Texas, they may have issues. The ones in D.C., I don't know. Okay. The other side of the coin is once Ted Cruz leaves the area,
yes,
it may well be that everybody just is relieved and goes on vacation themselves.
That could be. So
as far as the staff goes.
All right. Ted Can Cruz, I guess we can call him from now on. I'll be looking forward to see what happens with that story. We may have an answer for you on tomorrow's show, but if not, perhaps something we can talk about Monday. Doug
Landry, who's been tracking this, by the way, figures he was close to, but actually missed the upgrade. Thus, all the photos of him in coach. It's a fate all too familiar for those of us loyal to the Friendly Skies. Tough break. For Ted Cruz that he didn't get that. So maybe he did sit with Heidi. Who knows?
Okay, I didn't see her in the photo, but she could have been seated already. But so you're saying it's just that that he put his name on the list, but might not have gotten it. Okay.
Yeah, he's on standby for upgrade. He's number 2. And whether or not he got it, I don't know.
You're correct.
But the point is he was on the plane.
All right. I don't know. Those look like maybe wider seats that he's standing in, and who knows? I can't tell you the difference. I don't monitor the conditions in first class often enough to know. Okay. Well, good luck to you, Cruz. We'll see you on Monday where you spent the weekend.
You did us a service, Dad. You took us at least to the hour. So, that's what I got for you.
Appreciate it.
See, and I thought I was done 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But, always nice talking to you. I hate to get off just because we enjoy talking to each other. At least I enjoy talking to you. I can't tell what's going on at your end. That's your problem, not mine. But I will be back on Monday, regardless of how you feel about it, and we'll go from there.
Okay, very good. Well, I'll look forward to it, and we'll have all kinds of news there, and continuing coverage of the still dead Rush Limbaugh remaining there. So,
right. Remember, Monday is chaos. Roundup day, so Mondays are always difficult, but always fun because there's so much going on.
All right.
There's usually a theme. There's often a theme to the pundit roundups, and generally the Monday theme is chaos. So take care, and I will talk to you Chaos Monday.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Greg. Stay warm. Hope all goes well when you get the storm up there in Connecticut. I know you're used to it, so hopefully things will go better. You guys have plows and salt for your roads. Down in Texas, not so much the case. There really have been some real horror stories from down there. As a matter of fact, just to keep things serious, and why not, we're always constantly staying serious here on the show. And another break coming up, so we won't get into any of the longer stories. But Connor Kenny has a Twitter thread here for us, who... and many of you may follow him on Twitter as well. He's got sort of, I guess, an on-the-ground explainer of exactly what's going on, starting off this way. For my non-Texans, it's hard to convey how effed our state is. And it's a big state, and not all of it, I guess, is effed exactly the same way, so it is hard to convey, right? It's barely broken freezing since Sunday. Half of Austin has been almost entirely without heat or power for 2.5 days. Water pressure is dropping, and there's a boil notice, but half the city has no power to boil their water. We mostly heat our homes with natural gas here, he says, but furnaces need electricity, so they're out. Once buildings got cold pipes and started to break all over the town, right? I don't know what this sentence is sort of miswritten here. Once buildings got cold. Oh, I see. Once buildings got cold, should be maybe a comma, pipes started breaking all over town. Folks dripped their faucets in order to keep the water running so that the pipes don't freeze and they don't burst, right? You drip their faucets, but now there's not enough water pressure for that since there's already broken water mains all over the place. Mains are breaking with water running down the street, and there's nothing more galling than being out of water and seeing fresh water gushing out onto the street being wasted, and nothing more dangerous than having that happen at sub-freezing temperatures where you have no ice and no way of clearing ice from the streets. So anyway, this all started, as he points out, when several power plants, as he lists them here, nuclear, coal, and gas power plants, froze on Sunday night because they're not winterized, despite warnings after our last storm in 2011. And here's the really galling part of this is people were saying, initially we were all sort of reporting, well, Texas doesn't weatherize its power infrastructure because it so rarely gets severe cold. And we just kind of took that for granted as true. But in fact, they had similar problems in ancient days, 2011. And that's really, that's the big problem. It's within recent memory that there were dire warnings issued about the need to weatherize the infrastructure, but they just didn't do it because no one forced them to do it because they're not into forcing anything. So again, this all started when all the power plants froze Sunday night because they're not winterized, despite warnings after our last storm in 2011, because we deregulated everything, and industry owns the legislature and the governor. And I hear in the background here, I don't know whether this comes across in the microphone or not, but I guess our winter weather must have turned over into sleet or freezing rain at this point and is making that familiar patter and a lot of it very loudly on the windows here. Anyway, so yeah, Texas never took its own warning or its own advice about how to handle things. When the big power plants went down, the state grid operator cut local power. Yes, of course, we've heard about this. They have their own grid because we're stubborn like that. That sums it up nicely. Former governor / a-hole Rick Perry says the disaster is worth it, as Greg pointed out, because we don't want the feds imposing their evil safety regulations. And a nice Houston Chronicle account of that situation is attached in the tweet. There's more to it that explains just how many more things have gone wrong and why they've gone wrong. Perhaps we'll return to that after this 1-minute break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, what other entries do we want to add here to Connor Kenny's thread? How much longer does it go on here? Oops, I've shifted screens here. All right, we had just told everybody about reminded everybody about their separate power grid and their desire to stay away from federal regulations, but some of those federal regulations would have forced at least some of perhaps the weatherization and protections and redundancy that might have spared them from this current crisis. When the state grid operator, ERCOT, as we learned yesterday, told local utilities that they had to immediately cut power on Sunday night, many of them could only reach cut levels by shutting off every circuit that didn't have a hospital or nursing home on it. So no rotating blackouts, just one solid blackout since Sunday for most neighborhoods. It's almost never this cold and never for this long, Connor continues. Texans don't have fireplaces or many generators, although you'd think that they'd be into the generator thing just because that's a whole self-reliant bootstrap thing, but whatever. And many didn't have food supplies for what's looking like a week of lockdown. People are getting desperate, especially those who can't cook because the power's been out for 3 days. Lots of stories also circulating about people who have been, LARPing as survivalists for all this time, who likewise, for whatever reason, are unable to find food or find ways to live comfortably, even though they were supposedly preparing for a zombie apocalypse this whole time. But I guess a zombie apocalypse with heat and power. People just going to work, running to power plants despite the zombie apocalypse. Most cities here don't have plows and salt, Connor reminds us, so the roads are a mess. And I guess now just thawing and refreezing every day, which will, by the way, leave the streets themselves a bit of a mess once this whole thing is done. They'll be full of potholes and cracked utility lines as well. So that's going to be a problem. And, of course, if you are breaking the water mains and just covering the streets in water during freezing temperatures, well, you know what's going to happen there. It's a chemical process. You can figure it out. Most cities got their utilities deregulated, so they have zero control over power, and the few, like Austin, that don't have enough power to cycle. Hospital circuits must stay on. City governments are mostly powerless. By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if that explains some of the complaints that we were hearing about neighborhoods having their power shut off, but downtown city centers and skyscrapers, etc., being all lit up because the power is on there. I bet that's where the hospitals are, and that may explain things. Many families, mine included, are lucky enough to have family or friends in the city near a hospital. So we drained our plumbing so that it wouldn't freeze up, right? And abandoned our homes to go to them, I guess is the way he put it. I have neighbors who report 2 hours of power since Sunday and now almost no water pressure. It's getting scary. Where we are now in Austin, Connor says, people are out of food. Half the city still without power or heat. Citywide boil notice and little or no water pressure. Roads effed. And he's nice and helps us out and just uses the effed as opposed to making us come up with that term rather than repeat what he actually said. Stores are closed. Highs of 34, lows in the 20s for the next 3 days. It's bad, real bad. This is our Katrina. So another comparison. This was the looming danger, he says, behind the quote-unquote Texas miracle economy. We've invested the bare minimum in education, foster care, kids dying and disappearing in the foster care system, he notes, affordable housing, and public health. Healthcare in general, really. A-hole governor and Texas legislature refused to expand Medicaid, so hospitals are closing all over the place. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and they're cold. It's frozen chicken, I guess, coming home to roost. We were warned in 2011 that if we didn't require utilities to spend money on winterization, this would happen. And guess what? It happened. But we don't force industry to spend money in Texas, and now people are freezing and starving in their homes with no help on the way. And our feckless governor, who has never cared for governing as much as he has for his 2024 presidential run or protecting himself from a GOP primary challenge from our huckster lieutenant governor, offers nothing but pointing fingers at windmills and his own regulatory appointees. And here Connor embeds one of his own prior threads, just complaining about, quite rightly, about Governor Abbott, and basically his response to the whole crisis being, well, I can't actually do anything, so I'll just go on Twitter or on TV and troll Democrats rather than actually do anything. I apologize for my language, Connor is concluding here, and rudeness, but I'm just done with these Texas politicians who think they can cut a bit of taxes, start a minor culture war, and then ride the momentum to the presidency, like Rick Perry thought he could do, and I guess Abbott now thinks he can. Now they've gotten people killed, and they still just don't care. And then he has this to say, if you'd like to help, bless you. Throw some money at local organizations out there feeding people and getting them out of the cold. And he has, I guess, some suggestions in a tweet he embeds below. It's probably going to get worse in the next few days. If you pray, mention us. We're going to need it. That's the end. But then there's a P.S. The P.S. is, please don't throw insults or snark at Texans right now. We understand what our ruling party stands for, and nearly half of us voted for the other side. Right now, we're in bad trouble and concentrating on getting each other through this. Late-night bitter Twitter rants aside. So, lots of praise for his thread. Let me just jump back here where he said that he had included below some of the local organizations that might be a good place to send some money in the next couple of days if you think that you might be able to help that way. Let me read that off. Oop, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong one where he embedded the angry tweets about the governor not doing anything. Here we are. Here are the heroes, he says, helping Austin get through this. If you throw them some cash, they won't be worrying about holding back so as not to bankrupt themselves. And he's thanking Joa Spearman for having put this list together. And let's see, ATX ECHO is clearly a big acronym here, or not certain what it stands for, but ATX ECHO. which is the austinecho.org, I guess. That's listed underneath. All right, so each of these has the name and then the website. So if we don't know what it stands for, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out when you get to the website. austinecho.org. There's the Austin Disaster Relief Fund, which goes by its initials. Austin Disaster Relief Fund, ADRN.org. Dawa Heals. How about that? DAWA. What does it stand for? I don't know. Find out at dawaheals.org. The Austin Area Urban League. Maybe I should just retweet this tweet. For those of you listening live, you can just check those out. And I will have that on tap for Scott to include in the roundup, so you can take a look at this list if my reading it off doesn't make any sense. Austin Area Urban League, also on there, AAUL, Austin Area Urban League.org. The Other Ones Foundation, which goes by its initials, TOO, like two. Me too? Yes. TOO, The Other Ones, TOO Found Foundation.org, twofound.org. Austin EMS Relief Fund, you can find them, I guess, through a larger umbrella donation group, donorbox.org /Austin EMSRF, EMS Relief Fund. Donorbox.org /Austin EMSRF. Boy, I really screwed that up. But okay, I think you can find all of those folks. And again, I will include that list for you in the roundup, or Scott will. And I'm sure there are many, many more organizations. And if you have any leads on them and you feel like sharing them, and you throw them on Twitter with that KITM hashtag, maybe we can get to those as well. Okay, other comments coming in via the Twitter machine that might make good sharing. Karen sends us this one here. I like this description of Limbaugh. Who does it come from? Comes from Old Tall Guy on Twitter. J Jansen 15. So Karen SF, Kare, Kare SF sends us this description of Limbaugh. I saw the phrase "what a POS" trending, but I couldn't tell whether it was about Ted Cruz going to Cancun, Rush Limbaugh assuming room temperature, as they say, McConnell versus Trump, where both of them are POS. And looking through the threads, I guess all three situations apply. So you can't always tell exactly what's trending there, but should be one or all of them. Rebecca Romans, Lamb's End Bed, sends this piece of information here via Twitter from, who are we looking at here? Zoe Tillman, senior reporter at BuzzFeed, who says, in case you missed it, an alleged Capitol rioter photographed with zip tie handcuffs, the original zip tie guy, will stay in jail. So that seems like good news. Storming the Capitol to disrupt the counting of electoral votes is not akin to a peaceful sit-in, I guess, says the judge. So he, and I think Mom too, both remain in jail. There was some early indication that they might get some weird lenient treatment, as a lot of the Capitol rioters did. Lots of stories about people being released for vacations to Mexico, as a matter of fact, just like Ted Cruz. Or, let's see, the story I saw circulating yesterday, I wonder if I can come up with the Twitter thread about it quickly enough for, let's see, I don't even know how to note it, but Twitter thread of photos of a Capitol Hill rioter getting in fights with basically a whole room full of cops. And the quick and dirty summary of what happened was, I guess he engaged with police in what they call the Hall of Columns, one of the rooms immediately off of, I think, the Rotunda area, but and Statuary Hall. And anyway, engaging with police there, fighting with them, and then finding himself ejected from the area, but then returns twice more. In fact, returns a second time, fights with cops again. They kick him out again, and he comes back a third time to fight with them, and he's kicked out a third time. The real point here being that in returning twice and engaging and physically fighting with cops, none of the cops at any point think, yeah, maybe it's time we arrest this guy and process him right here, right now. They're instead, filling out affidavits and going out to look for him and arrest him again later, wherever he may have gone home to, as opposed to, this guy keeps punching us, we should probably arrest him. And maybe they didn't want to be responsible for holding detainees during a volatile situation and then becoming responsible for their safety in the middle of all that, but it certainly does seem like a crazy thing that you can break in and fight with cops 3 times, and each time they're like, please, sir, you're supposed to leave. Why don't you please get out of here? Save yourself. All right, let's see. What else have we got? Rebecca sent another story, by the way, saying, well, this grifter wasted no time. This a story that comes to us via Karen Atia. Is that who I'm looking at here? Washington Post reporter. Disaster capitalism, Texas style, she says. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones's natural gas company hits the jackpot as Texas freeze drives up prices. That's a great headline for anyone in Texas to see. And then speaking of people in Texas, how about someone who actually is in Texas? I guess that's the case. Mad Hatter, our friend Mad Hatter, Elrond50, who says, they're coping there. Power is slowly being restored in the Houston area. That will restore water, too. And yes, people are pissed at Abbott. So let them take it out on him and do it quick. Let's see. What else have we got here? Another contribution to the lineup here from Rebecca. This is going to give me a rage stroke. So in case you're looking for one of those, let's share this one. The Rude Pundit sharing this story from the Tennessean. Tennessee bill would grant fathers veto power over abortion. That'll boil most people's blood, I think. Rude Pundit, of course, suggesting, well, fine, and put the fetus in his body, let him carry it around. Par for the course, really. Something that Republican legislatures all over the place are doing. And if it gives you a rage stroke in Tennessee, it'll probably do the same for everyone else elsewhere as they suffer through the same thing. Let's see. What other things here have we got to add? I think we can catch up. I think we've caught up with that. People sharing the list of local aid organizations already from down there in Texas. So hopefully that'll do everyone some good. All right. Well, got a couple other things that we can check in on. Let me put a few of these stories aside and make my way back to what's in pocket here. And let's see. Oh, well, this one here. Hang on. Okay, from the Daily Beast. How did this suggestion reach us? Adam McGinnis sending this one on, suggesting that it might be a good read for, well, today or any day. The GOP finds the riot's real villain, Nancy Pelosi. That's certainly something we've discussed. We know they've been working on that and how ridiculous it is. But just to bring you up to speed in terms of what they're actually saying, besides the general news that they're trying to blame it on her, let's see if we can find any germ of truth in there. And maybe you can work on debunking it if that job falls to you at any point over the weekend or whenever. Egged on by Trump, the mob came literally to kill her, but of course in GOP land it was all Nancy's fault, says Molly Jong Fast, writing at the Daily Beast. You might be surprised to learn this, but the Capitol riot was actually all Democrat Nancy Pelosi's fault. Yes, you might think this is completely insane, and that's because it is, but despite its complete insanity, some Republican elected officials have decided that the real guilty party isn't the ex-president who shopped the big lie, tweeted about violence, and gave an incendiary speech that morning at the Stop the Steal rally. Lindsey Graham, perhaps inevitably, was one of the first to float the idea that perhaps this might actually be the Democratic Speaker's fault, asking on Twitter whether, quote, whether Speaker Pelosi, due to optics, refused requests by the Capitol Hill police for additional resources like the National Guard. Well, it's like blaming Hillary for Bill's affairs. Not the first time a woman has been blamed for something a man did, and likely not the last. true. I have seen him floating that. And, of course, he was floating the threat. Oh, if you call witnesses during the impeachment trial, we'll call Nancy Pelosi. Although, what made him thought he would get approval for that subpoena, I don't know. What made him think he would get any sort of anything helpful from her as a witness, I have no idea. And, of course, the whole idea that she was somehow at fault is ludicrous on its face all by itself. Anyway, let's see what else she has to add to this here. On January 6th, Trump supporters invaded the Capitol in the hopes of stopping the certification of the 2020 election. It didn't work. The election was certified, but it marked the first time that a peaceful transfer of power. Oh, well, you know what? This thing is going to get cut off by being a members-only article anyway, and I just don't have that privilege. So let's see. I guess I could pocket it and see if we can read that version of it, as opposed to, say, paying the Daily Beast for its reporting, which would be just a step too far. But let's see. So they invade the Capitol, tried to stop the certification. It wasn't really certification. It was a count, but, you know, we get it. It didn't work. The election was confirmed rather than certified, but it marked the first time the peaceful transfer of power was disrupted in our history. Rioters in various cosplay outfits, carrying everything from bats to bear spray to actual guns, stormed the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." 5 people died during the insurrection, and the following weekend, 2 police officers killed themselves. Now let's see whether we can read on in the pocket version or not. No, the answer is they have a very robust and working paywall over at Daily Beast, and I guess I should have checked that before I started. So now I guess those of you who are subscribers to Daily Beast can read the rest, and if you think it's worth our time, perhaps you could share the text of it, and we'll share it with the rest of us who aren't paying for the Daily Beast up to now. Maybe it will convince us. Okay, let's see. What other things have we got here? I'll note this, even though I really should have saved it. I wish I had this available for our discussion with Joan on Tuesday, but I guess they hadn't made their decision yet. Politico has this article, which I think is designed to panic you, and I did see a couple people panic and get upset about it and angry, and you should be annoyed by it, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Politico has this piece again. Senate Dems take a page from GOP in judicial nominee battles. That headline, I think, should be construed as encouraging, I guess, really, for Democrats. But the bulk of the story, the body of the story is what has people upset. The policy that Democrats are pursuing would make no change in the so-called blue slip process that Republicans changed in 2017. This has made it obvious that this is a very convoluted story. Well, I don't know. Let's just start reading it, and we'll explain it along the way, rather than explaining the headlines. Marianne Levine is the writer on the piece. Senate Democrats are planning to continue the GOP's approach to giving home state senators veto power over lower court nominees, while granting freer reign to President Joe Biden's circuit court nominees. For those of you who are familiar with the blue slip process and what it means, to cut through the convoluted part of the story, what appears to be the case is that incoming Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin is taking the path of least resistance here, at least temporarily, and maintaining the current Republican policy on blue slips. That policy for now is that blue slips are of no effect on circuit court nominees. That is, the appeals court nominees, the higher judges in between the federal district courts, the trial courts, and the Supreme Court, which is just fine, and is, I think, what most Democratic activists who are aware of the situation and follow this probably would have wanted. Yeah, don't let Republicans have any sort of unilateral veto on nominees to the circuit courts. However, the current Republican policy is that senators can still exercise their blue slip privileges with respect to nominees to the trial courts, to the federal district courts. And I assume here that activists would say, well, why are we allowing Republicans the opportunity to block any nominees at all? We should absolutely fill the judiciary at every possible opportunity with Biden nominees and not give any deference whatsoever to Republican senators. After all, they screwed us over on so many things, et cetera, et cetera. But again, reminder of what's being said here is that Durbin is taking the path of least resistance by adopting the existing Republican policy, so that at least logically speaking, there is no grounds for Republican complaint about how the blue slips are honored or dishonored, regarded or disregarded going forward, because if they have any complaint, they have only themselves to blame. But that doesn't mean that they won't complain about it. But it also doesn't mean that Democrats are committed to continuing with that policy. And as I understand it, it is noted here in the body of the story that basically they're saying, we'll continue the Republican policy, but if we find that Republicans are abusing it and blocking any or all nominees to federal district courts, we reserve the right to reconsider whether or not the blue slip policy will continue for the district courts. It won't continue for the circuit courts. The only place it continues now is for the district courts, and we might change that too. But for now, we'll give the Republicans the opportunity to show that they're going to be abusers of the policy, and then we will short-circuit that abuse if necessary. That's really what you should take away from it. But a lot of people were looking for a show of strength immediately. No blue slips, forget it. You're going to have no say in this whatsoever. And it might not be necessary to go that route. So, all right. The policy that incoming Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin is pursuing would make no change to the so-called blue slip process that Republicans changed in 2017 to yank home state senators' power to block former President Donald Trump's circuit court picks. While Democrats criticized Republicans for scrapping blue slips for Trump, they're now signaling that after 4 years of bruising judicial confirmation battles, they're not going to reinstate the obscure tradition that they had defended. Now, Republicans will take that opportunity to say, aha, see, Democrats are hypocrites. They said that this policy should not have been eliminated, but yet given the chance to reinstate it, they won't do it. Yeah. That's it. That's all I have to say about that. All right. So anyway, we'll continue with the article. Then Judiciary Chair Senator Chuck Grassley cited delays from Democrats when he did away with blue slips for circuit court nominees in 2017, while preserving the prerogative for home state senators to object to district court nominees. But the issue has been a point of contention ever since, particularly as Senate Republicans confirmed 54 circuit court judges as part of a broader march to reshape the federal bench with new conservative appointments. Democrats returned blue slips for more than 85 district court nominees over the past 4 years, the Democratic committee aide noted, a high number that leaves the new majority optimistic that the GOP would take a similar approach. Again, I'm going to have to perhaps explain things. We've come to think of blue slips as a bad thing. It's easy to think, perhaps, that what that means is, oh, well, when a senator doesn't like somebody, he turns in one of the blue slips and says, block this person. But it's actually the opposite. The blue slip is the seal of, if not seal of approval, then at least the okay from the senator to go forward with the nomination. So if you are looking to get those judicial nominees placed on the bench, getting the blue slips returned is a good thing. That's basically. So they're saying, well, even when reacting to the indignity of losing their blue slip privileges with respect to circuit court nominees, Democrats still returned blue slips for more than 85 district court nominees over the past 4 years. So that's a relatively high number. That means that Democrats were generally cooperative, even with Trump appointees for the district courts. So obviously, logic dictates that the Republicans will return the favor. I don't think anybody here believes that they really will, but that's the hope. Now, I guess that's just basically the approach that they're taking. They say, well, we hope that, you will return the favor. But if you don't, well, then we'll deal with that, or we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, is what the rest of the article has to say. 3 of the 50 Republican senators currently represent states that Biden won in November. That's Susan Collins in Maine, Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, and Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania. It's our expectation that Republicans likewise act in good faith and work with the Biden administration to fill district court vacancies in red and purple states, this aide said, and now we wait to see whether or not they will, in fact, meet that expectation. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Breaking Twitter news. The Dan Isett, whatever his name is, that Armando was responding to, saying that, basically this is a confirmation the cruise did go to Cancun. Dan has deleted the tweet. But he still stridently maintains on his Twitter page that this is all the fault of you stupid people who don't understand the difference between the responsibilities of a governor and a United States senator. Not really acknowledging the optical point here of what's going on, but I would never really expect anything different, even though I have no idea who the guy is. I have basic expectations about just what a jerk he might be. All right, let's see. Continuing with the Politico article about the situation in the Judiciary Committee, I think this is just basically a setup for the Republicans to fail the test, and then blue slips might find themselves endangered. But Durbin not jumping out and being proactive in getting rid of blue slips for district court nominees. And I can understand why. One, if you're reserving the right to do it later, why rock the boat now before Republicans make it obvious that it's necessary to do? And anyway, blue slips always made more sense, I guess, for district court nominees than for circuit court nominees, if only because, really, I mean, again, here the practice is asking home state senators for their, they'll give extra weight to the opinion of senators who represent the states where these judges are sitting. And with circuit courts, those are multi-state jurisdictions. And while it's true that the judge is from your state, it does, it's a little bit strange that, I don't know, like a senator from, New Jersey would be able to say, I object. He's from New Jersey, but I object to him sitting in the Third Circuit, even though whatever. It also affects issues in Delaware or elsewhere. I mean, it's plausible. I understand it, but it's not as clear to me that they ought to have that veto power, if that's really what it is, over judges that have jurisdiction over other states. Like, why not all the states in the circuit having blue slip privileges there, as opposed to, well, if you're being nominated for, the Southern District of New York, just to use the same district we use for everything else, should the senators from New Jersey have no say there? Not only it's because it's not in the same district, but because it's, the jurisdiction of that judge is going to be purely within the boundaries of New York, federal law as it's applied in the Southern District of New York. So to me, the blue slip made a lot more sense that way. Okay, let's see. So continuing on with the article here, it's our expectation, right? They're going to give the Republicans the rope they need to hang themselves on blue slips by allowing them to continue under the old Republican rules with regard to blue slips for district judges. Durbin's decision to keep blue slips for district court nominees isn't necessarily final and could change if district court openings pile up. There are currently 54 vacancies in the federal judiciary at the district court level. But for the moment, it promises to frustrate progressives who want to see the tradition disbanded altogether. Here's one such person. I do think blue slips should be scrapped. I think they should be scrapped for circuits as well as districts, said Christopher Kang, chief counsel at Demand Justice, a liberal judicial advocacy group. You're ending up with two tracks of justice where Americans living in a state represented by a Republican senator might have very different judges than the one who lives in a state represented by Democratic home state senators, he added. And that's a decent point, too. Yes, I mean, I think that's something that, look, the fact is they reserve the right to change this policy if things go haywire, and things very well may go haywire. Republicans will have a very difficult time resisting the temptation to make them go haywire. So why not just wait? To me, I think taking the wait and see attitude on it isn't the worst thing ever. What really worried me was that back in the day when Pat Leahy was chair of the Judiciary Committee, he kept doing things like he would reinstate blue slips for circuit court nominees when Republicans had eliminated them, and would handicap Democrats right out of the gate. And I don't agree with that. Durbin's not doing that at the very least. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm not going to get too exercised over it. Look, lucky me, I actually did put away the tweet thread about the Capitol rioter who kept coming into the Hall of Columns and fighting with police. The only downside of it is that I can't pronounce his last name. It's the rioter's name is Daniel Egtvet, maybe? E-G-T-V, that's right, E-G-T-V-E-D-T. Egtvet, maybe? Right? So that's my best guess. Anyway, this is actually a Kyle Cheney thread here. A newly filed affidavit against the Capitol rioter shows that this man, Daniel Egtvet, fought with an entire room full of police, was kicked out, returned, fought and injured police again, left, returned again, and fought with police again, and still wasn't arrested that day. And, you can imagine the comments that generated about white privilege going forward, and they're quite right. But anyway, I thought I would bring you that, and I'll share that thread with you so you can see the photos and screen grabs from the affidavit that will convince you that the wrong thing has happened here. All right. Another story to share with you. This, I think, has been largely overlooked, and really it's something that we should have thought of at the time to see whether this was happening, but gosh, so many other horrible things were happening. It's impossible to have noticed, but thankfully people at the much maligned and widely hated New York Times were watching. This is some of the good things that they actually do with their time. Eric Schmidt and Helene Cooper put together this piece that brings us up to speed on an under-the-radar problem that deserves attention. Promotions for female generals were delayed over fears of Trump's reaction. And you can see immediately why they were probably genuinely and rightly concerned that this would provoke some sort of reaction because Donald Trump is a stupid misogynist. But what ends up happening here is, in other words, there were highly accomplished women in the armed forces at the top ranks, some of whom were already generals of one rank or another, who were looking for and deserved and were overdue in many cases, for promotion to a higher rank of general, and I'm sure, colonels looking for promotion to the ranks of general officers as well. And all of them frustrated and held in place because people were afraid. Imagine this. The armed forces is afraid of the president. They're afraid of provoking a bad Twitter reaction over what? I don't know if even Donald Trump would have ventured out here, but who knows? But the point is that they were afraid unreasonably of stupid reaction from the president, and it's always good to bet on that president's stupid reaction. Anyway, I guess they're now starting to fix this thing, but let's take a look at the article. Under a Biden administration, the nominations are expected to go from the Pentagon to the White House within weeks and then to the Senate for approval. And then, of course, remember that the Senate is still half filled with Trumpified Republicans. Who knows whether they're going to be stupid enough to try and stick themselves into this situation and block any of these promotions. Last fall, the Pentagon's most senior leaders agreed that 2 top generals should be promoted to elite 4-star commands. That is pretty elite. It's the top. For the defense secretary at the time, Mark Esper, and General Mark Milley, then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the tricky part was that both of the accomplished officers were women. Why is that tricky? Because Donald Trump is an idiot. In 2020, America, under so-called President Donald J. Trump, the 2 Pentagon leaders feared that any candidates other than white men for jobs mostly held by white men might run into turmoil once their nominations reached the White House. And I guess it's easy to say without being those generals or their families or in the military. Well, they should have tried it anyway and dared him to make a problem. I don't know how comfortable that really is for the officers involved. Might have made the right choice here. Anyway, Mr. Esper and General Milley worried that if they even raised their names, General Jacqueline D. Van Ovost in the Air Force and Lieutenant General Laura J. Richardson in the Army, if they even raised their names, the Trump White House would replace them with its own candidates before leaving office. Oh, that really could have tripped things up. I see. So, the Pentagon officials agreed on an unusual strategy. They held back their recommendations until after the November elections, betting that if Joe Biden won, he and his aides would be more supportive of the Pentagon picks than Mr. Trump, who had feuded with Esper and had a long history of disparaging women. They stuck to the plan even after Trump fired Esper 6 days after the election. And here's part of the explanation. They were chosen because they were the best officers for the jobs. And I didn't want their promotions derailed because someone in the Trump White House saw that I recommended them or thought DOD was playing politics, Mr. Esper said in an interview, referring to the Department of Defense. This was not the case. They were the best qualified. We were doing the right thing. The strategy may soon pay off. In the next few weeks, Mr. Esper's successor, Lloyd J. Austin III, and General Milley are expected to send the delayed recommendations to the White House, where officials are expected to endorse the nominations and formally submit them to the Senate for approval. The story of the 2 officers' unusual paths to promotion, General Van Ovost to head the Transportation Command, which oversees the military's sprawling global transportation network, and General Richardson to head the Southern Command, which oversees military activities in Latin America, underscores the uncertainty clouding the final weeks of the Trump administration and the unorthodox steps senior officials took to shield the Defense Department from actions they believed could jeopardize policy and personnel. Pentagon officials say Mr. Esper and General Milley had good reason to worry. Trump's abrupt firing of Esper and the installation of a group of hardline loyalists into senior jobs at the Pentagon elevated officials who had pushed for more aggressive actions against Iran and for an imminent withdrawal of most American forces in Afghanistan over the objections of the military. Trump also named one of those loyalists, Michael Ellis, to be general counsel at the National Security Agency over the objections of the agency's director, General Paul M. Nakasone. I have that pronunciation right or wrong, Nakasone, perhaps. The White House rushed to appoint several Trump loyalists to Pentagon advisory boards, the governing boards of military service academies such as West Point, and other positions that could outlast the Trump administration. Trump, in the last tumultuous months of his presidency, had grown sour on both Esper and General Milley, whom he viewed as too open to the views of the movement for change that swept the country after the killing of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police last year. When General Milley apologized in June for joining Trump in his photo op walk across Lafayette Square, remember that? More repercussions from that. That had been, when he apologized for joining him in this walk across Lafayette Square that had been emptied of protesters by law enforcement in riot gear using tear gas, Trump derided his top general's apology to aides. When Esper and General Milley then, also in June, floated a plan to rename 10 Army bases that honored Confederate generals, Trump smacked them down in a string of Twitter messages, writing that my administration will not even consider the renaming of these magnificent and fabled military installations. And some of them are just regular old military. They're all regular old military installations, but whatever. Oddly, he capitalizes magnificent and fabled, as well as the M and the I in military installations. All wrong entirely. Okay. Well, it seems I've preempted Darwin here, our friend Darwin Darko, who says, well, I guess I'll cancel my plans to record that women in military promotions article. I guess so. I mean, surely there's something else. Or, look, if you have anything at all to add to it, I would be very happy to have you. You know you are our senior military correspondent. Put it this way. I've been better trained these days for angles on military stories like this by your contributions and by Judy Vincent's contributions as well. I've had my eyes opened to these stories, and maybe I'm learning to find them myself. So you can certainly give yourself the credit for that. But I probably should have guessed that you were going to do this. But all right, so I've discovered that it's important and preemptive. I've saved you some work, and now you can take the weekend off or bring us some other story that we have yet to pay enough attention to, or bring your own perspective to it. That is absolutely fine. The fact that I've covered a story doesn't mean I've covered it your way. That's for sure. That's the whole point of having these segments for contributors like this. But now I feel bad. But anyway, I guess I'll continue because we've started. Where were we with this? Right, his inappropriate capitalization and his angry tweets about the Confederate renamings. After Esper and General Milley both opposed Trump's expressed wishes to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy active duty troops on American streets to battle supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement, Mr. Trump made clear to aides that he was unhappy with both men. He was talked out of firing Esper last summer out of concerns of injecting the appearance of even more instability into an already tumultuous administration. But on November 9th, days after he lost the election, Trump made good on his wishes and replaced his defense secretary. Amid these hectic personnel changes and the unpredictability of a department led by Christopher Miller, an inexperienced acting defense secretary, Esper and Milley decided to hold back some top nominees, including Generals Van Alvost and Richardson, until Mr. Trump and his aides left office. Some former Trump administration officials disputed the notion that the nominations were delayed because of any White House animus toward female candidates. The Senate was unlikely, to have time to consider any year-end nominations, the officials said, so the Pentagon decided to submit their names after the new Congress took office in January. It's a possibility, but quite often military promotions are dealt with by, unanimous consent agreements, although maybe not for 4-star general promotions. They might have insisted on doing some work on that, but who knows? Anyway, it was about timing considerations, not that they were women, said Mr. Miller, who served as acting defense secretary for nearly 3 months in an interview. Had Trump won re-election, officials said, General Milley would most likely have sent the recommendations to the White House for approval, hoping for the best. But the general and Mr. Esper thought the personnel choices faced a smoother selection process under the Biden administration, and I'm sure it does. Biden and Austin could always pick other candidates, but Esper and Milley were confident that the new team would endorse their selections, who had been vetted and evaluated over several months. Colonel Dave Butler, spokesman for General Milley, declined to comment for this article. General Van Ovost is already a 4-star officer leading the Air Force's Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. Of the 43 4-star generals and admirals in the United States military, she's the only woman. A seasoned commander and Air Force Academy graduate, General Van Ovost's pick as head of the Multi-Service Transportation Command, also located at Scott Air Force Base, played to her strengths, officials said. So I guess she wasn't getting a promotion to her 4th star, but getting a promotion in the nature of the command she led. General Richardson is a 3-star commander of the Army component of the Pentagon's Northern Command based in San Antonio, where our friends at KSAT are reporting on the situation in Texas. I wonder if she's got heat. Anyway, Northern Command playing an important role in providing military assistance to FEMA's COVID vaccination program. Very capable, great team builder. Anthony R. Irardi, a retired commander of the Army's 1st Cavalry Division, where General Richardson was a subordinate, said in an email, "Gets things done." Okay, so succinct reports there from a former commander of hers. And again, back to Darwin on this. I guess I'll also say very often you bring us your commentary on articles from Stars and Stripes, Military Times, etc. And I would bet that there are still nuggets and various perspectives in there that aren't reflected in the New York Times reporting. Plus, of course, your own military experience that might make it well worth all of our while if you still wanted to comment on it. And hey, if not, and you just want to write a quick email that says, yeah, that just about covered it, and I'm glad you picked it up and maybe drop a few lines, we can certainly share those on the air too. I didn't mean to disrupt anybody else's interest in contributing. And the same applies to all of you. You know, we replay maybe it's time for a new announcement on your contributions to the show, as opposed to the financial contributions, but your actual contributions of content. We've been using the same one. It still applies, but I don't know, maybe it could use a refresher. But at some point, I guess, maybe tomorrow, we can spend a little bit of time reminding everybody. It doesn't require any professional expertise whatsoever, and I'm perfectly willing to listen through the piece and give it some light editing so that if you are worried about, well, gosh, I can't read through an entire article without this or that, or losing my place, or whatever it is. I do like to go back and I'll edit it to the best of my ability so that everything sounds as professional as possible in contrast to my live presentation. You'll end up sounding pretty good. Don't let it worry you. And pretty much everybody at this point, if you have the means to listen to this show, which is online only, then I think it's almost impossible for you not to also have the means to record a segment so that if we're ignoring news that you think is important, or ignoring an angle on news that we did cover but you think we missed, or just want to say something on the air, or have ever thought about having your own podcast and figured I'll try it out 3 minutes at a time by myself, turn on the smartphone, tell us what you have to say. Email it to us, send it to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and we make space. I don't think we've ever not done it for anything that was of reasonable length, and sometimes things of unreasonable length. I think once we got a submission that we just didn't have time for because news was crazy and it kept happening over and over again, and we missed it. And I think actually Eric Posman, who's submitted many segments, I think we may have missed one of Eric's at some point, and I apologize for that. But we also got a submission from somebody who had these great segments on Louisiana politics, but they were basically doing entire podcasts, and they sent us their podcast. And I said, well, that doesn't seem like something we can do. Just run somebody else's podcast in the middle of our podcast. So, okay, that one didn't work out. But basically, if you've got a a couple minutes of commentary. With Darwin, we sometimes hand over 10, 15 minutes. When the subject is worth it, we make it work. So whatever you might be thinking of course, you can always still just say, hey, read this article. It's a really good one. I don't have time to do it, or I'm embarrassed, or I have a Mickey Mouse voice and I'm worried about it for whatever reason. No problem. Okay, anyway, let's see. A few more minutes here to fill out during our Thursday show. Of course, Friday, our big wrap-up for all the things that we have missed to date or skipped over several times in order to bring the breaking news, or what passes as breaking news here. How about this one? Let's share this, because it's just a couple minutes, and not breaking news, but Marjorie Taylor Greene still in the news, still sniping about various things. I see her taking pot shots at I don't know who this morning. Doesn't matter. I'm mostly ignoring it. But I have this tweet thread here that might be of some interest to you. Paul Matzko, Matzko, who is an historian and author of The Radio Right. I imagine he's probably doing an awful lot of interviews today about Rush Limbaugh, which reminds me that perhaps I should check in with Ian Reifowitz to see, I don't know, he's probably also busy beyond belief doing radio interviews. But at some point, we'll want to see if he's got time between his teaching schedule and doing all the interviews he's probably doing about Rush Limbaugh to see if he wants to say a few words one way or the other about the passing of one of his favorite study subjects, let's say, and whether he's got something to add to that, I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Paul Matzko has this to say. If you think Marjorie Taylor Greene is an unprecedentedly conspiratorial, bigoted nut job, you may be right. But let me, he says, introduce you to a Republican congressman you may not have heard of, James B. Utt, U-T-T. So that, yes, honest to God, that his middle initial is B, so that if you're not careful, it does look like James Butt. But he's James B. Utt, who represented Southern California back when the state was a reliably Republican state in the 50s and 60s. That's a whole show all by itself one day, but check this out. Utt was a John Birch Society ally. The John Birch Society was somewhat analogous to QAnon in a way, heightening every political disagreement into a sinister conspiracy. He was also a Republican racist at a time when that was still somewhat novel, blending racism and conspiracism in a now familiar combo. Take how Utt responded to civil rights protests in Savannah, Georgia in the summer of 1963. Civil rights activists were winning concessions in the city that year, with Martin Luther King even calling it the most desegregated city south of the Mason-Dixon line. Conservative segregationists started spreading rumors that a U.S. Army training exercise in the swamps near Savannah that summer was really an operation to prepare the way for a, quote, Negro communist state to be carved out of the South. And there's a map accompanying it here. And if you want to talk about gerrymandering, this is the most gerrymandered looking thing ever. But apparently a Negro communist state that would stretch all the way from, Virginia up to like the Maryland border, western Maryland border, down through the eastern seaboard, covering the Outer Banks of North Carolina, down into Georgia, and then across a swath of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, even into eastern Texas. Really an amazing thought here. Anyway, unless conservatives acted right away, then 10 million white people would be driven from their homes to make room for black communist Soviet. Wow. I mean, that is some vintage Birch era stuff here. And I guess he believed in it. The goal, allegedly, was to make white Southerners terrified that the civil rights movement wouldn't stop with demands for equal treatment. These rumors from the 1960s served a very similar function to the rumors today about the post-George Floyd protests of 2020. This is the same function. of all those right-wing rumors blaming Antifa and BLM for all the violence last summer. Not all the whatever. Okay, that's what it says. All the violence last summer and on January 6th. Accompanying a New York Times article, how Republicans are warping reality around the Capitol attack. You know all about that. GOP conspiracy mongers like Marjorie Taylor Greene are trying to prevent reform by scaring white supporters into thinking that civil rights activists won't stop once they gain equal footing. They'll want to take everything from you, your police, your suburbs, your elections. But what does opposition to desegregation in Georgia have to do with Utt, who represented California? Well, he took notice because he was ideologically committed to segregation, voting against the Civil Rights Act in 1960 and 64. So, Utt pulled out the key weapon of Congresspeople at the time, the mailing list. He sent a breathless letter. Now hear this and listen well, he started, to all of his constituents and allies promoting the conspiracy theory. There's more to the thread. I'll include it in the roundup. Take a look at it. It's very informative. I think you'll enjoy it. And now, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook
From
and Speakeasy.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, here we go. Frustrated U.S. military commanders scramble to knock down internet rumors as thousands of troops refuse the vaccine. Yikes. The share of U.S. workers holding multiple jobs is rising, and Trump's acts as president are fair game for criminal charges. That's good news. Those stories and more coming up next.